Hi everyone, my name is Lillian Manna and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm making a video on how to suffer less and how to trust yourself more. I feel that I'm capable of helping others with this situation because I experienced it myself, and through that I wanted to help other people. As I'm learning in this channel, I'm going to be using, flashcards to make sure I hit points that I should be, because everything that I feel that I have learned has a point and can help anyone. So let's get started. Before I was able to trust myself, it's like I was always second guessing. My anxiety led to procrastination, and that just created an endless cycle of, anxiety and procrastination. Nothing was getting done, so then I was anxious about it, and then I was anxious about not getting anything done, but then I was so worried I couldn't get anything done. It was like an endless cycle. For about 4.5 years, I worked at a private practice, a neuropsychologist office that didn't have any set scheduled hours. The leadership lacked. I was in charge of my own schedule, and at first it was really scary because I can tend to self-sabotage if I feel there's too much wiggle room, and I can admit that. It never really crossed my mind previously to actually quiet my mind. There was an event, of course, that led to this, and I'm grateful to be where I am today. I did leave that bad situation. Actually, it's my first video on this channel. It's called Taking My Power Back. It's describing the difficult situation I was in of being groomed and abused by my previous psychologist, if you want to check that out. But after leaving the situation, I was having nightmares. I was feeling guilty for things that were just simple. I couldn't sleep in. I couldn't sit down and just listen to my thoughts. I was always talking to myself negatively, as if I wasn't worthy enough, or I should be shamed or guilted, and I didn't deserve to feel proud for anything that I've accomplished, however big or small. It got to the point where I couldn't sit down, and even my dad had noticed, I was going nonstop for about 4 or 5 days, and it's just task after task after task. I felt I needed to keep going because that was just my response, my anxiety response, my fear response. And I was going to clean the car out after I had already done multiple chores through the day, made sure everything was taken care of, and I was still going to go. He had told me, just sit down, I will help you. And I knew if I sat down, I most likely wasn't going to get it done, but I think that's what he was aiming for me to just take a break. That helped me realize, it's not the end of the world. And I know that, but it's hard to remind yourself when you're in this mind frame. I was beginning to narrate all of my actions around my family. It's like, it really brings back walking on eggshells in this previous relationship and having to read someone's mind and not knowing what's going to happen next. So it's like I always have to narrate what I'm going to do so that I wouldn't be the one being scolded or in trouble, feeling guilty and shamed for something that I felt I should or want to do, regardless of want or need. Luckily, thanks to my faith, knowledge, intuition, and courage, I was able to get out of that situation. After leaving that horrible situation, it really led me to, seeking validation online that I wasn't the only one going through this. I wasn't crazy as this person, or how people in general can make you feel. And I wanted to know more. I inquired about my emotions and suffering and toxic relationships. It led me to YouTube, the greatest thing to just listen to while you're getting tasks done. I got turned on to Jordan Peterson, who is a psychologist that talks about multiple things, but in my sphere, it was toxic relationships, betrayal, psychological and emotional abuse, and all of it really hit with me, and I thought, I am making the right decision. It really cemented that I was okay and going to be okay. After that, I was led to Dr. Gabriel Mate, and he talks a lot about, trauma, processing your experiences, and reaching your higher self through suffering, which I found to be incredibly inspiring. Last that came up was Dr. Ramani on YouTube, and she talks about trauma as well, toxic relationships, but she really pinpoints the narcissism and the subtle ways that people can make you feel, that can get into your head, that you start to second guess yourself. And I had realized, okay, I'm not the only one that has experienced this, and if a doctor's talking about it on YouTube with this many views, it has to be more common than I would have previously known, I remember something specifically that Jordan Peterson said after leaving this horrible situation and not knowing who I was, what I was going to be, what my decisions were. He had said it takes 18 months for trauma recovery, for you to even look back on your trauma without emotion. And that really hit home, because I didn't really know what I was in for until I really started looking. I realized I was living in a partial perception of myself. It's like I knew who I was, but I wasn't sure of it. It's like I knew what I was capable of doing, but there was something in me holding me back that said, no, you can't. I craved healing. I just wanted to be healed and be whole again. I was diagnosed with a chronic condition, autoimmune disorder, in 2014. After that, I thought I lost who I was, but in reality, after coming out through this bad situation and healing myself, I feel more like myself and alive than I ever have. So during this healing process, of course, I was trying to just get away from the pain. I didn't want to have to endure that anymore after so much loss and pain that I've dealt with in my life, but I knew this is something I was going to have to go through. I couldn't go above it, I couldn't go below it. It was only going through. So I thought, who am I? Who do I want to become? How do I control my thoughts and emotions so that I could suffer less? And I cemented in myself things that I knew that I was, regardless of if I felt it then and there, and I made it known. I know that I am a creative, intelligent person with a lot of experience, professional and life experience, with a passion to help people. So I started setting that in motion. What else was I going to do? Just stay in my victim mentality and say poor me? Unfortunately, that's not how I work. It's not so much unfortunate, I would say now it's fortunate, but in that immediate moment, I knew this was going to be hard. But while looking for knowledge and how to suffer less, my inquisitive nature helped alleviate some of that pain. So my background and experience, I knew that I could help people, especially myself, so I thought just start with me and grow outwards. I have a degree in behavioral sciences and psychology. I worked at that previous neuropsych office where my previous psychologist groomed me into a quick marriage and abused me. I was there at that private neuropsych office for about 4.5 years with, like I mentioned earlier, no set hours. Everything was expected to get done, but nothing was structured, or I was not given expectations. And so being given that much control over what I was going to do kind of scared me, But I continued forward, and as I observed and continued to grow, I was able to get past, the learning struggles. When I first left this situation and just trying to stay busy, I wrote up a research proposal to create a mini screening neuropsychological battery to determine the path for diagnosis for children, whether that be learning disability, developmental disorder, movement disorder, or ADHD. In my time there, I noticed there was a lot of misdiagnoses, and I thought, what better way to help than to help these kids suffer less, educate the parents, and get more time back for them. After submitting my application to Pearson for this research proposal, I began to research recreationally for myself, for my entertainment, for my knowledge, for my hunger that I needed to know more. I really delved into philosophy and theology, and I knew that that's what I was sure of. My passions: helping people, psychology, philosophy, theology, figuring it all out to aid myself and hopefully through my experience. So with those 4 cardinal virtues, I began to implement them even more so in my life. I always felt that I was a virtuous person, but I actively started looking into what they were and what they meant and how they correlated to what this world is and why it's better to use them. And so I have a small definition of what each of these virtues entail. Courage is being able to be resilient in adversity and deciding how you want to act. Justice is, maintaining what is right and just, even in difficult times. Wisdom is knowing the good and the bad and basing your decisions off logical information and experience that you've previously had. Moderation would be non-life of excess, controlling your impulses, your emotions, and really looking at the long-term picture instead of the short-term picture. And that really helped me implement that I was going to be okay in this very moment. I had found a Stoic week through YouTube, and this happens every October, and I decided to be part of it to make myself busy and challenge myself. The first day was controlling my reactions. I realized that I'm in control of my reactions. Whether that emotion fills me, how I react is up to me. Then comes maintaining these emotional impulses, and during this day they give you every day actually, they would give you a slight little impromptu writing, and this one was seeing your day and thinking about the emotions that you most likely will have, processing them, and knowing that you're all right and you are able to react how you would like. Next day was the virtues, the cardinal virtues, and implementing those in your daily life, how you see them. So caring for self and others was the last day, and the Stoics coined a term, oikeiosis, which is a Greek word in which they talk about making yourself whole and a home first before you bring in the next layer of people within you. And that really hit home, because how could I help anyone if I myself wasn't okay? And so I kind of saw it like a lasso effect. I lassoed myself and I became my circle, and from there I just building up from myself to my family, and my family to my community, and community onwards, and hoping we can spread it all. Through Stoicism, if I noticed my triggers, I would remind myself that I am okay. I had closed eye visualization scans of my entire body, while noticing that each part was okay for that exact moment that I had my eyes closed. I would open my eyes and I would tell myself that I'm okay, and I'd feel better. This made me realize I really need to create new habits. Especially having this background in behavior, I know that once it's implemented, if you continue going, it will become easier. And that's definitely what it was. I had to practice more discipline. I was trying different routines. I would reward myself, whether it was big or small. Small reward, big reward. No one else was going to give it to me, so I made sure I gave it to myself. I released all negative self-talk. I didn't want to self-depreciate myself anymore. That was not who I am. I know that's not who I am, and even for a moment I wasn't going to let that be me. I pursued my actions and I acted out in motion who I want to be. I began, my research, and I became part of a life coaching program. That's when I found there was these 8 categories of wellness. And the way that I see these 8 categories of wellness, or even, these 8 dimensions of wellness, is it's like a wheel. If one dimension wasn't functioning properly, it will slow down the entire momentum of the wheel. These 8 categories of wellness are physical, intellectual, emotional, social, spiritual, vocational, financial, and environmental. Every aspect of that wheel maintains to your wellness. I actively envisioned who I want to be, who I am going to be, while maintaining checks and balances on these wheels and just making sure they were all up to par to at least keep going. And then I would look further to see what actually needed help. This led me to Carl Jung, which is a psychoanalytical psychologist. He is a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who founded the branch of analytical psychology. The definition for analytical psychology is a theory of mind that emphasizes the importance of wholeness. And when I say wholeness, I imagine a wheel. The wellness wheel is to keep you good for functioning, and so is wholeness for each individual. Analytical psychology was based off the empirical science of the psyche, and the psyche, he realized, is a self-regulating system similar like the body. What goes into your psyche, like your body, can vastly improve it or greatly deteriorate it. So it was up to you. And I really liked having this choice and choosing to be the better version of myself, willingly. So once I started actually looking up, striving for psychological wholeness, what does this mean? The closest thing I could attribute to this is the dimensions wheel. And I thought, okay, well, if wholeness is every dimension being treated properly and working accordingly, why wouldn't I want that? And in psychoanalytical psychology, wholeness is an ideal state wherein all our latent potentials are actualized and all elements of our unconscious are brought to the light of the consciousness and integrated harmoniously into character structure. I want to note that character is what you do when no one else is around. So it's the core of your being, who you really are. To reach wholeness, you only arrive through new insights, awareness, self-acceptance, and self-compassion. New understanding of the mind and the body connection. When striving to become whole, there was an even more in-depth definition of what I wanted to become in Carl Jung's terminology. It's a process of individuation, which means working towards wholeness. And while becoming whole, you become more yourself. You will realize it's a manner in which things are identified as distinct from others. You will become more yourself, more unique, more individual. You will be distinct from others, and it helps with integration between parts of the self that are conflicted and uniting them with the psyche to use to your benefit, And the way that Carl Jung describes individuation is an unconscious, natural, spontaneous process, which I found to be very interesting, and I wanted to really break down. So I want to break down that definition, okay? So unconscious is a part of the mind inaccessible to the conscious mind, but which affects behaviors and emotions. Now, natural, existing in or caused by nature, not made or caused by humankind. Spontaneous, occurring without apparent external cause. Process, series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. So when you think about an unconscious, natural, spontaneous process, what it's saying is individuation breaks down to being a series of events caused by nature without an external cause that your mind is not actively controlling and can make your unconscious work for you. And I found that really appealing. It sounds all hoo-ha, but once you actually start reading into this, these things work. Through individuation, you want to bring negative parts in unity with your positive parts. It's a wholeness, it's a whole circle. So per highexistence.com, it's extremely hard to see the shadow parts of ourselves, and our conscious minds avoid our own flaws. Of course, no one wants to think they aren't perfect. No one wants to deal with the bad parts of themselves, but they still want to deal with them on a deeper level. Your conscious does. So we end up magnifying these flaws in others, and this can be seen as projection. Seeing our darkness, what projection is seeing our darkness in others that we won't admit in ourselves. Narcissists and abusive partners use this blatantly and say that you are what they are, and you can notice it even more so once you come to that realization. So once you figure out your shadow self, you can do something called shadow work. And it sounds scary and like it's supposed to be some type of dark theme or dark process, but it really isn't. What shadow work means is you identify and assimilate the undesirable parts of yourself. You notice thoughts that produce shame or guilt, fear, any tools that can be used against you. You have to pinpoint negative thought or triggers and then peel it back to find out what's at the source of this. You end up questioning yourself backwards and taking note, physically taking note of why you feel a certain way and pulling it back till you get to the core of it to really understand what it is you're feeling there. You can always use psychoanalysts, you can use YouTube, you can even do it yourself if you wanted to research it, but it's always a useful tool that can help integrate the things of yourself that you don't want to admit. It's a really radical, accepting approach, and becoming just aware of these shadow parts of yourself can begin that integration. Any personal triggers that you have can be seen as like a check engine light to look further into to see why you're feeling this way, if it's plausible, if it's not, and regardless that you're going to be okay. A personal trigger for me was sleeping in. Anytime I would sleep in at first, I would think to myself, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get anything done. And that's just my self-sabotaging self. So in the end, I would end up not doing anything productive because I had it in my mind already that nothing was going to happen. And it was basically a self-fulfilling prophecy. And after I did the shadow work, I found what's called inner child healing. And that one's going to be more vague. It's really personal to every person. So just, take from this what you'd like. During this inner child healing, you'll have to hold on to a childhood event that you don't like to look back on. Sometimes that may be intrusive to you. And there are five steps that you'll want to do with this. First, you'll want to give yourself permission to heal. Second, give yourself permission and others to heal and to forgive. Realize that this event was not personal. Everyone in this event was doing the best that they could at the time, regardless if it was good or bad. This is the decision that they made that was a buildup of every other previous decision, and they thought that was the best decision at that point. So forgive yourself and forgive them. Third, I love you. Remind yourself that you love that younger version of you, and you love yourself now. Stay in connection with that younger version of you and stay in a love experience. Number 4, you'll want to honor the journey together with your child self and yourself currently, because you wouldn't be who you are now without that previous child. So honor that. Lastly, you'll want to integrate and come to terms with the fact that yourself now and the child that you once were are still the same person, and thank yourself for being there for yourself when no one else was. And thank yourself for going back for yourself to come forward despite the fear of having to look back at an uncomfortable situation. Next, I realized how to process my feelings. The ego pushes down uncomfortable thoughts, which leads to repression, that things can be brought up later on, which will create that shadow that I mentioned earlier. This is more of a physical feeling and technique than a theory. So if you notice you have a bad thought, something anxiety inducing, your mind wants to switch it out right away. But instead, stay with it for a second. Find the physical feeling in your body while holding the thought. When I get anxious or have a bad feeling, I get this pit in my stomach and I instantly try to change it. And I had realized, okay, stay in this. Hold on to the physical feeling that I'm feeling here. You'll want to release the story that's causing this feeling in my stomach. So while the story is released, the only thing that's left is the feeling. And while you're holding that, tell yourself, I am loved, I am okay, on repeat. Your body will process and release the feeling on its own while you maintain holding on to the feeling, because it can't keep going forever. It has to release, and your body will process it on its own without that emotional turmoil going on in your head, creating thoughts and negative self-talk. Practicing this can train your body to feel safe despite the circumstances, and regardless, you'll be able to use your mind to aid yourself and feel less fleeting, less panic, and use your mind to propel yourself. So as I learned all these things, I try to pull it all together. I thought, okay, let me see how I can pull this all together. I removed my victim mentality. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to be okay with being wrong. Be confident in what you want to say, because even if it doesn't come out right, as long as it's what you want to say, you need to hold firm in that, regardless of what others think. because that will just be a good checks and balance of who is around you and who respects what you want to say and what you want to do. And just remember, it's okay and pretty much necessary to mess up. You have to pull back and reevaluate to keep going. There's no way this can be so easy. If it was so easy, everyone would do it. So it's like every time you keep going and you get stopped or you get wrong or you feel that bad feeling, pull back and reevaluate and maybe go through these steps again. See where you can, loosen a knot or oil some part of yourself that hadn't been oiled in a while, Just make note and use that to propel yourself. There's so many different ways of saying just the same thing. And this concept that I'm bringing up, it really transcends cultures and labels. This is a similar teaching throughout history and cultures. And I wish I could tell you one thing to help you suffer less and trust yourself, but I can't sell you a single process because it's an amalgamation of many. And so I try to streamline this process for others and put this out there. And people wonder when on this journey or when something bad is happening, why is something bad happening? And I don't think there can be any good without the bad. And bad is not only bad for bad's sake, but for good to be fortified. Think of it like creating a marble sculpture. You need to chisel away the bad to create your good. You're just a block. You have to chisel out that bad and find out your good and make the sculpture that you want to become. You want to trust your experience and more. You want to trust your experience and move through life's experiences through the highest form of good, also known as love. Trust your experience because no one can take that from you. Your experience is your truth, regardless of how it makes you feel. Process those feelings, but your experience is still yours, and no one can tell you it's wrong. Just take it one step at a time. Reframe your negative thoughts as check engine lights. Just take that, note it down, either on your notes app, jot it down on a post-it, write a journal, whatever you have near you. And just remember, it's you have to keep going and you will get better, and it does get easier. I can promise you this. A really nice quote that I found during this research was what Zeno of Citium said. He is the founder of the Stoic school of philosophy. And he had said, well-being is attained by little and little, and nevertheless is no little thing itself. So all in all, it's just perception change. You just have to start shifting to use your hindrances in a motivational aspect to get you where you want to be and who you want to be. So now we'll be going over to my advice segment. I don't have anyone asking questions just yet, so I'm going to use an example on Reddit. So this was posted by the Fancy Nut on the subreddit Vent. It's titled, "I Feel Like an Asshole." The Fancy Nut says, "Whenever someone shares some deep info like a family member's death or vents to me, I have nothing to say. I can't say anything without worrying it's gonna piss them off or make them worse or something. It's driving me insane. Sometimes I can't even say, I don't know. I don't know why. I just can't put sympathy into words, and it's broken so many friendships just because I don't know how to respond to things. Please give me advice on how to fix this." So I would say, the Fancy Nut, you are more caring than half of the people that would just say sorry or my condolences, So changing this perspective now into I care for others and want to make them feel heard and seen and I just don't want to mess up. I don't want to make them feel worse about it, but I need them to know that I care. And the first thing I would recommend is just be honest. You know, say, I'm not good at these things, but I'm sorry that happened to you. Most of the time they'll say thanks and just change the subject. They just need to hear that they're heard. You know, second, ask. You can ask. Is this something you want to talk about? Sometimes people just need someone to listen to, so you don't need to give advice or try to make it better. They just want to be heard. Sometimes they don't want an answer to their issues. How can you solve this issue? You can't. And that's another thing. We all need to remember that everyone's problems are not our own, and only our problems are our own. And sometimes our problems aren't even problems, but just a perspective that needs to be changed. Third, I would tell Fancy Nut, the Fancy Nut, let them know, although you may not know how to move in these situations, that you care, so they could let you know what they need. And just remember to be mindful that you never have to help them what they ask, especially if it's out of line, but it's always nice to give that out if you feel comfortable. And just communicating, letting them know what's going on. That leads me to the last piece of advice, number 4. You know, this is something that I do myself. I notice if I'm unsure in some social situations, if you communicate out loud the uncomfortable things that are going on in your head and just, you know, let them know you're moving with the context you have, people are very kind to let you know what's needed or not. And whether they do or not, or if they get frustrated, you made sure that you did your due diligence of communicating with those around you and letting them know that you care for yourself and also them. So I would say use that perspective change to really garner your self-perception and who you are, and just go through there. If you say something you realize you didn't like, pull it back and then just find out why, and then just do differently later. Nothing is an end-all be-all. Everything is constantly changing, so just keep moving forward. Okay, so that's the end of this video. I hope you guys liked it, and please like, share, and subscribe. Feel free to check out my Instagram page at @millillianmana, and check out my previous video if you'd like to, of course, where I talk about how I took my power back after being groomed and abused by my previous psychologist. All right, thanks for checking in, everyone, and look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye.